What was the worst job interview you've had? I drove an hour away to an interview at 8 a.m. I waited outside the interviewer's office until 8:30 a.m. with no one to tell me where to go or where she was. Finally, another employee walks by, and I asked if they know where this woman is to interview me. They had no idea where she was, why she was late, and told me if she wasn't there yet, I should leave because she probably forgot. Okay. I decided 45 minutes is the cutoff, especially standing in a government building looking like a creep, waiting. 8:45 on the dot, she rushes in, flustered, wet hair, and in casual yoga pants. With all the resurgence of patience I could muster, I greeted her and was met with a passive-aggressive scolding of how the interview was at 9, not 8. I triple-checked the email asking me to interview, and it was 8. We had conducted a phone interview, and she followed up with an email request to an in-person interview at 8. I was 100% positive on this. I hate being late. Even with this, and I did say, I'm certain you said 8 a.m., ma'am, she wasn't having it. Conversely, she also went on about why she was late. Surmounting in, she went to the gym and forgot her garments to change into, and then had to stop at a store and buy new ones after working out before coming to work. She told me this in the first 5 minutes. Why? I didn't ask her. Regardless, she looks at my resume, apparently for the first time, because she proceeds to tell me how it is unimpressive, and my graduate studies should have yielded numerous publications after 1.5 years. In my field, most don't publish until after 3 to 4 years. Even still, she kept saying how I had moved up the interview time, showed me the workspaces, and told me I probably wouldn't be interested in what they do here. I politely told her I had driven, at her request, to be there and interview for employment. I was very interested. She waved me off. As we left, I just tried to hold it together. I was very poor and very desperate for a job. Thanked her and told me how great it is to work for the government, how good the benefits, the pension, the time off are, on and on. She said, if you can find an opening working for the government, you should try to check it out and get hired on. Hold up. I just looked at her in the face and said, yes, ma'am, that was my hope with today's interview. Thank you. Left and sat in my car and bawled the whole drive home like the desperate loser I was. That was a low one, to be sure. Well, at least she was fashionably late. Still sucks, though. Story 2. Company was downsizing. All employees in a specific yet exclusive division were fired in order to reapply for their position plus 2 other jobs in the company. You'd either get one of those jobs or be terminated. The subsequent interviews were conducted with a manager and an HR person. First interview in, executive suite. Manager asks, why aren't you applying for this key supervisory slot? I had listed it second on my list. Me, I would prefer to stay in my expertise in which I won a national award. HR, I didn't know awards like that existed. Second interview, current boss likes me for my existing job for which I was heavily recruited from another company. HR, wow, so you're the guy who does this job? I had no idea a real person did it. Third interview, HR person says he's never heard of my division or that employees actually worked at night. I had listed this job in which I merely served as a minor manager as third on my preferences. Really didn't want it, but had to list 3. The results? I was retained but transferred to the third day job. My old award-winning job was given to an aging staffer who never worked in that position or had a clue. The supervisor job went to a brilliant colleague who wanted and deserved it. I quit very soon thereafter and joined a bigger company with better benefits. Scale pays off. After all that, my old company, seeing the error of its ways and lost production and general lack of ability, offered me a bonus to return. Nope. And I'm returning the corporate weapon you stuck in my back. Story 3. Yeah, I have one that sticks out. I applied to a government branch as a network admin. The newspaper ad asked for a bachelor's degree. They called me into the interview. When I got there, the first thing the interviewer said was, we wanted someone with a master's degree. Why did you apply? Now, I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they had other interviews that day and got them mixed up. Stuff happens. I just informed the interview that the ad I applied for requested a bachelor's degree and confirmed the position I was interviewing for. No, we definitely wanted someone with a master's degree. So, again, why did you apply? If you wanted someone with a master's degree, why did you bother calling me in for an interview? Well, you're very rude and unprofessional. Yeah, you messed up at every junction thus far, but I'm the one who's rude and unprofessional. Story 4. The interviewer insisted on knowing why I'd left graduate school. Now, I had left graduate school because my advisor passed away in a car accident, and the whole small department was thrown for a loop and no one seemed to know or care what was going to happen to me or my just starting my research project. The interviewer wouldn't even accept, my advisor passed away suddenly, and dug into the details until I was almost in tears, even intimating that I must have had feelings for my advisor. I couldn't wait to get out of there, and in my haste to leave, I knocked some solutions off a cart, which had no business being in his office, BTW. On my way out, I'd never been so humiliated in my life. After that, I was sure I'd never get a job in science. Story 5. 5 interview rounds, with the last interview round being with the CEO, all for an entry-level customer service job. During the last interview, the CEO said you weren't allowed to get sick and you weren't allowed to leave at the end of the day until all of the work had been done. So even though the job was 8 to 4, the CEO said customer service reps often stayed until 6 p.m. or later. She also asked if I would be comfortable secretly reporting to her about what the customer service team is up to. I declined the job offer, and the company pestered me with emails asking why and what they did wrong. Really glad I didn't take that job. So they were hiring a customer service rep or a secret agent? Story 6. This was quite a while ago, maybe about 2010, and the recession was still hitting the job market pretty badly. So here I am, graduated from college a few years before and looking for anything. I interviewed for a job calling people trying to recruit them for 2-year college. I think it was National American University. I had experience with customer service and some phone work doing tech support at my college, and this one would be within my abilities. About halfway through the interview, I could tell it was going poorly. The guy interviewing me was asking me to give a sales pitch on recruiting, and I was failing. We got to the end, and he was upfront about saying I wouldn't be a good fit for what they needed. However, he did give me a bunch of great advice on how to properly interview and to be able to sell myself to a prospective employer. He even did a little coaching session with me. I knew he could see I was desperate, and I was unemployed, and he took time to help me out for my future attempts. I did take his advice and was able to get a decent job eventually. I've always used the tips he gave me, and they have helped me greatly, so to that guy, thanks. Story 7. A marketing internship the summer before my senior year of college. I remember showing the job description to my dad, and he told me it was going to be door-to-door sales. I didn't really believe him, and I showed up at 9 a.m. for the interview. Right away, I knew Dad was right about it not being a true marketing internship. There were 5 other applicants also waiting in the lobby with me, all for the same position. Behind a closed door, we could hear people shouting and laughing, and the receptionist explained that they like to have fun, and this was their Tuesday morning trivia game. While the employees were playing their game, the receptionists made small talk for over half an hour. I'm wondering why they dragged us in at 9 if they knew no one would be able to interview us then. Finally, trivia ends, and it's time for us to get paired up with a current employee to shadow for the day. This was not explained beforehand and not what I would consider an interview. After all the other applicants are paired up and leave to do door-to-door sales or whatever, I'm told my person wasn't there that day. Now, I'm really annoyed about 1, being lied to about the interview process, and 2, the fact that they attempted to reschedule me when they knew my person wasn't going to be there. The receptionist takes me into another room to show me a diagram of the company structure that is a pyramid and tells me that pay is commission-based. I leave and am relieved a week later when I'm told I didn't get the job. Story 8. I had a phone interview and the woman kept asking more and more intrusive questions, kept hinting I'm a total piece of trash who's totally unfit for the job. It was the easiest job description ever, and jumping to conclusions about my life that were completely untrue. For example, I found out that being a freelancer who gets a lot of decently paid work each month is apparently living off my parents. She kept going on and on like that for a while before I told her to get off and hung up. Didn't really need that job too badly, but it was in a different country, so the travel aspect was the main reason. Years later, I found out it was a stress interview, which apparently is a thing. Screw those people. Story 9. Many years ago, I was interviewed for an IT director position at a finance and legal consulting firm. Apparently, they were expecting an older-looking person and assumed I was there for the temp/admin positions. I was given a reading comprehension test, a typing test, and a spatial awareness/IQ test. These took a bit over an hour in total. When I was done, the guy said, "Okay, thanks, we'll call you." I asked about speaking to the CIO and other tech directors for the IT director position. He looked at me like I had 3 heads. They kept me waiting for about 25 more minutes, realizing the mistake, scrambling to pull things together. After 45 minutes of waiting, I told them I was going to leave. The headhunter called me right away, really upset that their mistake may cost her a commission on finding me and wasting my time. We had a very nice discussion about how she needed to screen/brief her clients better, and how they made several bad assumptions that could be an HR issue within the HR department of the consulting firm. I never worked with her again, no idea if they ever found a new IT director. I feel like I dodged that in a potentially disorganized/toxic workplace. I did learn that at the time I was typing 80+ words per minute, mistake-free. Story 10. I went into a family-owned custom furniture shop that had several openings in the carpentry department, red flag number 1. When I arrived, I spoke to the person at the front of the house, stating I was there for an interview. The conversation went as follows. Note, owner's office was directly behind the front desk. He was watching us through a two-way mirror. Me to the front desk clerk. Hi, I'm here to interview for the carpenter position. I saw your post online. Owner storms out of his office, points a finger at me, face full of anger, red flag number 2. Owner, are you experienced? Me, yes, I have 7 years experience with carpentry, but I am new to furniture. Owner, are you experienced? Red flag number 3. Me, yes. Owner, fine, I'll get the lead carpenter and he'll talk to you. At this point, I should have noped the heck out of there, but I had been unemployed for some time and my savings was running on fumes. So I assumed he may have just been in a bad mood that day, so I had waited for the lead carpenter. Lead carpenter comes out and we have the interview on the sales floor. Interview goes as normal until he asks me about my experience. Carpenter, so tell me how you have experience with woodwork but not with furniture. Me, I build musical instruments. I'm familiar with all power tools and measurements required. Carpenter looks at me like I have 2 heads while I explain this, but the rest of the interview proceeds as normal. He stated he'd start me off at $10 an hour probational hire for 2 weeks to see how I fit. Part of the interview comes where he asks if I have any questions. Me, so is the owner having a bad day? Carpenter, no, that's how he is. Red flag number 4. We have an awkward silence staring at each other for about 10 seconds, and without saying anything, I just walk out. Found out a few weeks later from a friend who is a woodworker that place is known amongst furniture woodworkers as a place you want to avoid, and he mentioned that a few days before I interviewed that their entire carpentry staff, minus the lead carpenter, about 8 people, walked out. I now live about a mile from that store and pass it on my daily commute. Every 5 to 6 months, they put up a now hiring all positions sign up front. Can't imagine how many people they have cycled through at this point. The carpentry shop is in South Florida. Apparently, they stay in business because they do amazing work. Two-way mirror, also known as two-way glass. A two-way mirror is glass that is reflective on one side and clear on the other, giving the appearance of a mirror to those who see the reflection, but allowing people on the clear side to see through as if at a window. The name is misleading, but that's what it's called. This was 4 years ago now, so about $10 an hour was way too low for the verbal cruelty and labor. In my early 20s, I built guitars, ukuleles, and occasionally violins. I have since changed vocations, but still repair them from time to time. Oh, okay, the two-way mirror, a subtle way to say, we're watching you and we don't like what we see. Story 11. As the interviewer, candidate responded to a question I asked with, is that really how you want to spend our time together by asking me that question? When I wrote up my notes, I included that bit. It obviously came up in the debrief and a huge red flag. Other interviewers also had similar, though not as serious feedback on the candidate. He was not hired. As the interviewee, interviewer immediately launched into with a rough, accusatory tone, you're a job hopper. Why are you a job hopper? When I was being recruited for a role a few years ago, I'd been working successfully as an independent consultant for 7 or 8 years, which she equated with job hopping. I ended that interview pretty quickly with I don't think this is going to be a good fit, and gave the recruiter some pointed feedback. He seemed to acknowledge that she was difficult. Story 12. Background. My face tends to get really red when I'm stressed or embarrassed. In a previous job, my company hired a consultant to help some of us improve our presentation skills. Consultant gave me some good advice. One of the weirder pieces of advice, however, was that if my face got red, I should flex my calf muscles because the flexing would divert it away from my face and to my legs. I had no idea if that was true or not, but it was weird enough that I remembered it. Job interview. About 10 years later, I'm giving a presentation at a job interview. I'm a scientist, and giving a research presentation as part of my job interview is pretty common. My research was pretty good, but it had one critical flaw that I wanted to avoid discussing during my presentation. Somehow, everyone in the room locked in on the flaw and directed a barrage of critical questions at me. I could feel my face starting to get red, and all I could do was furiously flex my calf muscles, which didn't do a damn thing. I didn't get the job. Story 13. I was interviewing for a job in Houston and lived in Austin, about 2.5 hours away. I drove to Houston for the first round of interviews, and they said it went well and wanted to bring me in for a final interview, so I drove there again. It seemed like it went well, and they told me that they had one more interview to conduct and would have a decision tomorrow. So the next day came and went. I emailed the manager to ask if any decision had been made. Nothing. Waited a couple more days, left a voicemail. Nothing. Then a couple of days later, I just called the main number for the company and told the receptionist why I was calling. She was like, well, someone just started in that job yesterday. So they ghosted me after I drove a total of 10 hours to interview twice. Still salty about that 11 years later. Story 14. I walked in at 2:45 for a 3 o'clock interview. At 4 o'clock, I asked reception for the last time if I was going to be interviewed. Finally, they showed up 5 minutes later. There were two people during the interview. They were hostile, rapid-fire questions, half of which had nothing to do with my experience. One kept asking where I worked during such and such time, despite the other one looking at my application with all that info. Then they told me that if they hired me, it'd be for a position below what I applied for, much lower pay, and I couldn't take time off. Finally, they basically told me they'd be watching me like a hawk, and if I did substances, I'd be fired and arrested. I've never even smoked. I stood up and told them this wasn't for me and walked out. It was bizarre. I felt like I was being interrogated for an investigation as the prime suspect. Story 15. Oh, I got this. My interviewer comes in about 30 minutes late, and his first comment is, "You're the best-dressed candidate we've had all day." I'm in a polo and khakis. This man is a mid-50s-ish, well-groomed man in a button-down shirt and tie. When we get to the interview room, I expect this obviously senior and rank guy to do the interview, but when we arrive, the manager, in quotes for later, turns out to be an early 20s white guy in a t-shirt with a dyed purple mohawk. I was beyond confused, but whatever, don't judge a book by its cover. The manager then proceeds to stay, sitting as I shake his hand, never motioning for me to sit, not asking for a resume at all, and just start with the questions. I'm not a very formal guy, but even I was confused by all of this. All the questions are normal stuff like where do I work now, my school, if I live in the area, that stuff. Then he gets into specific job questions and starts with, what would you do if you knew an employee was stealing? Obviously, I tell him that I'd report that employee because you aren't allowed to steal. Well, what if it was the cheapest item in the store, a 99-cent water bottle, and they only did it once? Again, I'd say stealing isn't allowed and those costs can add up if they keep stealing. Well, let's say it's your store. G-Money 5100 supply store. What do you do? I tell him if it's my store and one of my employees feels a need to steal water, I'd probably just buy it for them and tell them not to steal in the future. Well, what if you forget your wallet? You forgot your wallet and you know your employee is behind on rent and their last paycheck hasn't gone through yet and they haven't been paid. At this point, I'm just at a loss for words. What the hell is going on? Does he want me to say I just let someone steal or something? I genuinely feel like I'm being punked. He notices I'm kind of stuck and just moves on. All right, how about we test your sales pitches? Imagine someone comes in and wants 4 of the chairs you're sitting in at $25 each. How would you sell them the chair I'm sitting in for $100 each? Again, I'm at a complete loss. What can I possibly say to that? If someone comes in wanting one kind of a chair that's obviously a cheaper option, how the hell am I supposed to convince them to pay 400% that price for a different chair that's not obviously better in any way? Especially on a product I know nothing about. I don't even remember what I said, but there's no way in hell it was coherent. After this, the guy ends the interview without ever having seen my resume, calls me by the wrong name, and sends me on my way. As for why the manager was in quotes earlier, a coworker of mine who knows a worker there told me about a week later that nobody works in that store has a purple mohawk. All of the district managers are black, and the older guy I described is a store owner who should have done the interview. I still don't know who did my interview. Story 16. Started as worst and ended as best. The beginning started like this. I'm so sorry to have to inform you of this, but we pulled the wrong resume contact information. We didn't mean to call you in for an interview. Before leaving, the interviewer gave me a brief tour of the company grounds because they felt so bad for wasting my time. They introduced me to the department head that I would have been working for if that department was actually hiring. Had a great conversation and the department head was convinced that I would be an asset to them and they hired me on the spot. I have been with this company for over 8 years now and they are an awesome bunch of people. It was just a very unlucky/lucky day for me. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. A bit of context, this happened in 2008 and I had just graduated as a massage therapist. Since the company was in the pits due to the recession, glad this never happened again, MTs were not exactly in high demand so employers could be picky. The only reason I was even considered for most of my interviews was because I graduated from an accredited school. A lot of the places I interviewed at would turn me down pretty quickly since I didn't have either 10 plus years experience or the body of a supermodel. I'm 100% serious, by the way. Easily the worst experience was at a chiropractor who did absolutely nothing to hide his contempt for massage therapists. He showed up late, went into his office to check his mail first, and then proceeded to have the interview with me in his waiting room. He knew he could pick any MT he wanted and gave zero care about how I felt. When it finally got on the subject of pay, he offered me minimum wage. At the time, your average MT was paid about $20 to $30 an hour, and I was already working a job at a gas station making $2 more than what he was offering. I brought up how absurdly low his offer was, and he balked, saying that I would be paid as if I were working 40 hours a week, so it would even out. He also clarified that I would be expected to clean the office when not seeing a client, so I'd also be an underpaid janitor as well. Screw that guy. Story 18. I had a Skype interview with a private practice, and the lady interviewing me literally made it sound like a stern military parent. You can never be late. Mind you, the job was an hour away. Even if you have a cold, you can never call in sick. We're a small company, so you won't have much of a work-life balance. P.S. Our pay for this dedication is only $3 more than the measly pay you're getting now. Just a whole interview of red flags. And the last one was when the lady messaged me immediately after saying I got the job and had to leave my job at maximum 5 days' notice, regardless of me kind of bombing the interview and claiming there were other interviewees in line. I could see why they were having trouble hiring people, to be honest. Story 19. I once had an interviewer like this. His exact quote was, "We don't care if you have a sick kid that needs to go to the ER, you can never have time off for the first 6 months." Which A, is illegal here, and B, I have a disability, so I needed time off every few months for doctor's appointments. They could not understand why I turned down the job. The recruiter actually called me to try and save the job offer and told me I was misunderstanding. Here's how that went. Me, okay, I'm happy to be wrong about this. What am I misunderstanding? The manager was pretty clear that no one gets time off for any reason, even an ER visit, for the 6-month intro period. Then he asked to extend the intro period to 1 year, so no time off for 1 year? Is that still the arrangement you'd be proposing? Recruiter, well, yes, it's just that every new hire goes through this. Me, oh, okay, I understand that, and that's why I'm not accepting the job. Recruiter, but everyone, maybe you can negotiate some time off? Me, per state law, I'm entitled to XYZ. The company cannot refuse it. The company has told me they plan to refuse it. I'm not quitting my job, which has unlimited PTO, for a company that told me I couldn't take my hypothetical child to the doctor or have a vacation or a sick day. We are legally entitled as workers to sick time, and you've now told me that you violate the law for every new hire at the expense of their own health and their child's health? That's not the type of company I want to work for. Recruiter, but you're misunderstanding. Everyone we hire does this. Me, well, not me. Thanks again for calling. Story 20. I had an interview where I knew the answers I gave were good, solid examples. I understood the technical side well, but the interviewer kept sneering, being rude, and saying, "Really?" in a skeptical tone. I got the distinct impression he hated me. About 20 minutes in, I thought about politely calling it a day and leaving, but in my innocence thought it would be good practice to stay. 40 minutes in, it's like a light switch goes off inside and he's the nicest guy, his eyes light up, and he starts hard selling the role and position to me. Introduces me to the team, the director interviews me, and he and the team are lovely. Apparently, their interview technique is to be rude to see how you perform under pressure, and they'd all been observing using a camera, and were impressed I remained so polite and calm throughout, they couldn't understand why I declined. I understand pressure testing is a legitimate technique, and whilst I felt deeply uncomfortable and my gut was screaming at me to get out of there like in a nightclub, when you know the creepy guy is really bad news and you need to get out, I understand that it was a possibility that that is what he could have been doing. However, to add more context, they had my work history, including 10 years in the ambulance services, which involves resuscitation whilst the public yell at you and threaten you. I'm used to being polite and professional whilst being pestered and threatened. Nothing spreadsheet-based, even pulling all-nighters is going to match that for pressure, and I'm well known for staying calm and composed all the time, even if I'm exploding inside. My biggest objection was not realizing I was being broadcast and hearing them discuss my reactions to my face like I was some kind of movie actor. It felt so violating. Story 21. My personal favorite bad interview. I had been unemployed for a bit and was desperate for a new gig. Had gained a lot of weight living off of fast food, so my good pants didn't fit me very well. I sat down in the interview chair as a person was walking around to their side of the desk, and the button on my pants popped off, did a one-hopper off of the desk and right into their coffee cup. Swished, no clink at all. For the entire interview, they were sipping their coffee, and I was sitting there with my pants unbuttoned waiting for the big reveal. I left before they got to the bottom of their coffee, but they had to have put 2 and 2 together. No, I didn't get the job. Yes, I should have told them, but I froze up, and they were a very talkative interviewer. This narrowly beats out the time I was offered water from a carafe at an interview, dropped it, and soaked both interviewers. At least that one wasn't as psychologically tense. Story 22. I applied for an internship at a human rights law office. They gave me questions on the spot to debate with them, like, should people accused of mistreatment remain anonymous until convicted? And is bribery acceptable if it's for a good cause? It was me versus a panel of 5 senior human rights lawyers for a whole hour who just ripped me apart from start to finish. Everything I said, they made sound like the dumbest response with their rebuttals. By the end, I was a nervous, babbling wreck, did not get the internship, but did appreciate the experience in retrospect. When they got back to me, they told me your CV resume was fantastic, so we were quite disappointed with how poor your interview was. Burn. Story 23. As the interviewee, I told them I hated salespeople when they asked why I'd left my last job, which exposed two things about me. I hadn't looked up the company I was interviewing with and that their primary line of business was sales. The mood got chilly real fast after that. Did not get the job. As the interviewer, had a guy ask if it was okay if he went to the restroom real fast and then never came back. His recruiter, who had come with him, was super embarrassed by the whole thing. Honestly, he was a young kid who had just graduated, and while he was getting some of the more in-depth technical questions wrong, he definitely was asking the right questions in return, so we probably would have brought him in on an entry-level position. I think he was experiencing a case of imposter syndrome since we were asking him things he didn't know, so he panicked. I hope he received some coaching on how to handle that. Story 24. I was being interviewed for a video editor / post-production kind of job in a video production company. This company was owned by a couple. Their son, at the time maybe 18 or 19, conducted the interview. He asked me to write an essay, which I spent a good hour or so working on, and then went on to interview me, asking a lot of really weird questions totally unrelated to video production or anything to do with the job. I left the place feeling weird and angry about the time spent working on the essay and had absolutely no hopes of getting the job. Eventually, I went on to work on something else. A couple years later, this couple was terminated. Both were ended while working in their offices. A brief police investigation found the culprit, and the son was arrested and convicted. He's still in jail, so in a certain way, one of my worst job interviews turned out to be the one that might have saved my life. Story 25. During the summer after my freshman year of college, I applied for a part-time job at a mall outlet. Despite having zero retail experience, I got through the first round of interviews without any trouble whatsoever, performing well enough that the assistant manager wanted to give me the job on the spot. Since she didn't have the authority to do that, though, I had to meet with her supervisor a couple of days later. It's really just a formality, she told me. To make sure you're not like a serial criminal or anything. I told her that I'd only ever terminated people in video games. It wasn't as awkward as I'm making it sound. Anyway, when the date of my second interview rolled around, I was in high spirits. The manager had me fill out a brief questionnaire and then started asking me some fairly dull questions. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until a particular inquiry caught me off guard. "What's the most that you've ever stolen?" the man asked. "Give me a dollar amount." I stammered. "Is that really a question you can ask?" "I'm just looking for a dollar amount." I racked my brain, trying to think of anything that I might have actually stolen over the course of my life. I'd certainly gotten up to my fair share of mischief, but actual theft had never been part of my repertoire. "Zero," I finally said. "I don't think I've ever stolen anything." The manager's plastered-on smile suddenly dropped away. "See? Are you sure?" "Yep." "Really?" The beginnings of a suspicious glower darkened his eyes. "Go ahead and answer again. Just give me a dollar amount." What had started as a dull interview had become a downright bizarre interrogation. I thought about getting up and leaving, but it occurred to me that the whole thing might have been a test to see if I would change my answer. "Zero," I said again. $0. The man sighed and put down his clipboard. "Come on, do you actually want this job?" he asked, mirroring my own thoughts. I nodded in reply. "Then you need to start being honest with me. Just give me a dollar amount." "Fine, it was $16. I finally lied, pouring sarcasm into my words. $16.42. The transformation was immediate. All of the disapproval evaporated from the manager's face, being replaced by a warm, visibly amused smile. "Hey now, that's not so bad," he cheerfully said. "So what was it?" "A toaster." I hadn't even bothered to think about what $16.42 might actually purchase. I just said the first thing that had popped into my mind. It didn't seem to matter, though. My answer caused the manager's grin to grow even wider, and he spent the rest of the interview laughing and joking with me. The next day, I got a call, and I was asked if I still wanted the job at the mall. I told them that I'd already taken a different position elsewhere. For the record, that one was also a lie. Story 26. It was going to be my first real job using my college degree. I'd planned for it, bought new clothes, developed answers to questions I thought they'd ask. The day of, I was sick. I called and asked if we could reschedule. They said the slots are full and that if I wanted the job to come down and interview. Well, I went down because, needing a job. I was sweating through my shirt because of my fever. I nearly threw up just waiting to be called. Finally, I get called in, get weird looks from other interviewees. I sit across the table from my interviewer, a very pretty lady. She smiles, but it's forced. I see her look over at me with disgust, proceed with the interview. I'm still a gross mess, and halfway through, I feel the bile rise. Think to myself, if I retch, I won't get the job, but I burped. It couldn't be stopped. She looked even more disgusted, asks why I didn't reschedule the interview. Told her I was sorry that I tried to reschedule. She thanked me for coming in and asked me to leave. Still got the job. Story 27. I went for an interview as a receptionist like 7 years ago for a vet. I really wanted to work for the hospital for years as it's highly regarded in the industry in town. I researched everything I could, tore their website apart, read about all the doctors, thought tactfully yet not know-it-all type questions. I did the work. I brought up one of the services they offer and they had no idea what I was talking about. They treated me like I was a child. They embarrassed me in the attitude they had towards me. I came dressed in a pencil skirt, dress shirt, blazer, and low heels. I did my hair and makeup perfectly. They had no reason to treat me the way they did. I was eager, friendly, and on time. I still to this day have no idea why they hated me so much. I felt and left dejected, humiliated, and insecure. Story 28. I had a manager call me for an interview just so he could tell me what a POS I was because I'd had 5 jobs over a 15-year period. 2 of those jobs were internships in college. A third was a temp position while I found a job in my field. I was unemployed because my last position in the company went bankrupt and closed. Apparently, he only hired people who worked somewhere for at least 10 years or had never worked before. I'm not some shrinking violet, so I let him have it for wasting my time and being a toxic, stupid waffle, and yes, I called him a stupid waffle. When I got home, I called their HR department and told them essentially he must get his rocks off by belittling potential and current employees. When I walked through the employees, they all looked miserable. I'm pretty sure one of them shook their heads and mouthed, "This place is awful." Story 29. I got an interview with Amazon to be a quote-unquote supervisor. They asked me to drive 1.5 hours to another city to do my second interview, despite the place I applied for being 10 minutes away from where I lived. The pay they were offering was good, so I thought it was worth it. I took a day off from my current job, drove there, discovering that they had given me choppy directions, causing me to get lost and have to ask for directions. The place I stopped at rolled their eyes. This wasn't the first time this had happened. They knew exactly where to point me. Red flag number 1. I finally arrived, go to the interview, over 100 people show up. Red flag number 2. They are doing a group interview for the role of supervisor and tell me they accidentally invited too many people and they only have 10 positions available for supervisor and asked me if I'd like a starting position instead for a barely above minimum wage. Red flag number 3. But then I realized this is way too organized. They expected this many people because they planned this and even had everything set up for a large group interview and even asked me personal questions about myself in front of multiple people. Red flag number 4. I do my best, but feel insulted. I drove home feeling cheated. I wasted 4 hours driving and interviewing, wasted all that gas and lost hours that I could have worked and went out of my way, wasting my precious time, going to another town just for them to say, oopsie. They planned this. I realized working for them would be a huge mistake. They had no respect for me as a person, a potential employee, my time, gas, money. What made me think they would care about me once I'm hired? This was clearly a deceptive bait and switch, and I was not falling for it. Shady, shady, shady company. Shame on you, Amazon. I later sent them a letter declining them for the position. I would not be working for them. Story 30. At the time, I was living in this foreign country for about 2 years, and my language skills were only at a A2/B1 level, so I could understand pretty well but was terrible at speaking. The interview with 3 people didn't go very well. They spoke in their native language. I tried to respond in said language, couldn't, then switched to English every time. Luckily, everyone spoke English, but I was embarrassed the whole time because my language skills weren't where they should have been. Luckily, due to me being technically overqualified for the job, Bachelor in Science, and that the management is extremely nice and welcoming, I was offered the job that day. It turned out to be the worst interview of my life, but I'm still working there to this day, 2 years later, and improving my language skills. I'm still extremely happy, and I've never had more caring, down-to-earth management in a job. I got really lucky they gave this English speaker a chance. Story 31. The interview was at a well-known bank in the city for a software developer job. Walked into the interview room, shook hands with the 2 guys when one of them said, "Nice to meet you, Jessica." My name is not Jessica, so I'm immediately confused. Apparently there was a mistake and they wanted to actually interview a Jessica and not me. We went along with the interview anyway, but they were clearly frustrated. It was one of my first real job interviews after school, so I was trying to stay positive anyway, but lost it shortly after we started. I gave them a synopsis of my background and how I got into programming by creating video games when I was a kid. Their response? We're a bank, we don't make video games here. I didn't even know how to respond. Like, did they think I was actually that stupid? Anyway, I wasn't expecting to ever hear back, but around 3 months later, I got an email for the job offer. Obviously, I didn't take it, but I'll always be genuinely curious if that was meant for the real Jessica. Story 32. I was taking a test to be a biology lab tech. I'd only recently moved to SoCal, and my issue was that a lot of the test was about local biology that was unfamiliar to me. The test was going so bad that I just switched to writing down jokes because it was a lost cause. One of the final questions was, what is reclaimed water? And I drew a comic strip of one character with a glass of water, a second character stole it, and then a fight ensued and the first character finally reclaimed his glass of water. I handed in the test and was about to walk away in horror, and then he was like, oh, okay, come into my office. My heart dropped to the floor. We sat in his office, and I think he really liked me, but he started flipping through the test, and I could just see this bewildered look on his face. He told me he'd let me know how I did on the test, and I think I said something like, I hope you give extra points for humor. They did not give extra points for humor. I didn't get the job. I did, however, pass the chemistry test for the same organization. Lucky for me, chemistry is the same in all parts of the globe. I worked within close proximity of him for several years. He told me that he had my test hanging in his office for a while. And well, if you like these stories just as much, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.